We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful, and American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals, and we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
So there you have it. Mark Carney said the quiet part out loud, and I gotta say, it's refreshing. Um, this was a great speech. I cannot say anything bad about it in terms of the speech itself. The content I will talk about on Bad and Bitchy. So if you haven't signed up, go to badandbitchy.com where you can get these free updates and extended videos in terms of my thoughts and basically just dissecting different topics.
Hello, subscribers. Here we go. Um, I have thoughts about this speech. It is convenient. Number one, it is convenient to say now that Western countries have been threatened by US imperialism that all of a sudden they believe in the rules based international order again. When they didn't believe in it uh, for Venezuela, and they didn't believe it for the Palestinians. So, or at least they didn't act on it. So, I think, when he says that the rules based international order is over, I just think, my dear, it's been over for a while now. Okay. All right. So these are also the same leaders that about 2 weeks ago praised the toppling of Maduro, which in itself was a violation of the rules based international order. So, like, that to me is hypocritical. Either you're going to apply these rules in one place and everywhere or nowhere at all. And I think even Carney said that, but again, the actions that even Canada has taken thus far are not really conducive to what he's saying. But I appreciate, like I said, that he said the quiet part out loud. I also want to mention that nobody else is talking about the indigenous people of Greenland. There may have been a couple of articles about it, but I noticed that they're being kept out of the conversation, which is just more colonial bullshit. So, Inuit in Greenland call themselves Kaluktik. Kalaklik. Kalaklik. Okay, got it. And their land is Kalaklik Nunat. and so and so that is a piece of the story that I haven't heard of much. But I did find an article from CBC that actually talked about um, basically these people being just pawns in this game of global domination. and of their land actually being a pathway to the Arctic and establishing Arctic sovereignty. A while ago, I had written a piece on that Arctic sovereignty and the importance of Inuit peoples in establishing that in a rapidly melting and warming Arctic Ocean and just Arctic region. So I will put that up with this video, and then you can, you know, chew on that. So, the chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, whose name is Sarah Olsvig, she wanted to say that no, they don't want America on their land because they've been colonized already. And like she said, I love this. There is no such thing as a better colonizer. And I love that. I love that because it's true. I feel like all they're doing is switching colonizers. And although they and the Danish have had more familiarity, let's say, it's not as though the US is going to be better. And who knows? I don't know what worse looks like because I don't know much about Greenland's indigenous struggle. So I think that's something that I should read up on, and hopefully you will too. Okay. She also says, we have already been through colonization, and we know what it means when the interests of others and more powerful nations and peoples affects us negatively, and when decisions are taken thousands of kilometers away from us. So, they really are not being offered sort of freedom, like true freedom in their lands. This is just the power play of large global powers and, of course, middle powers. I wish that Carney had touched on that, but a colonizer is going to colonize. What can I say? I will also say this about the Maduro instance is that American imperialism, now that it's reached the shores of the West were usually collaborators with America in American imperialism. If you think of Britain's MI6, you think of Canada, and I believe it's CSIS. No, I think it's the CRE that does that intelligence gathering stuff. And who else was I going to say? CIA. Okay. And of course, the French intelligence services. I think their acronym is DGSE, if you want to look it up. They have been collaborators in toppling governments and stealing land and resources anywhere you could think of in the global south and, of course, the Middle East, which I suppose is part of the global south. So I don't know if there's one country in the global south that has been untouched in terms of those foreign intelligence agencies toppling governments, instituting revolts and strikes, threatening them economically, and then and supporting coups. That has happened all over the world forever, but for America since about the 1800s, 1880s, 1840s, something like that. Anyway, point being that if they didn't do this to Maduro, if they didn't allow this to happen to Maduro, it could be said that Trump would not have had the buy-in, the tacit buy-in to do what he's doing now. So that's on Western powers to say, wait a minute, I don't think so. That's not part of the rules-based international order. But of course, the West is going to be the West. So something else I said was we saw the American hegemonic project in the Americas since the 1800s. And this is the US expanding its sphere of influence to NATO countries. I really do believe that the US is trying to carve up a sphere of influence that includes all of the Americas and Greenland. So it's like from the Arctic basically down to the southern tip of Chile, maybe even Antarctica, who knows. But this is what the US considers its sphere of influence, and I do believe it includes NATO countries. I also believe that global capitalism is not gone. It is the chief oppressor, let's say, to all of us. And I do believe that global capitalism is actually shifting from returns in the West to returns in the global South. I could be wrong. If you know anything about this, feel free to tap in. This is also reminiscent of the Monroe Doctrine with the Teddy Roosevelt corollary. Please look that up. And also, that imperial boomerang is coming back at us, and it is hitting hard. So I have a couple more points to make. Number one, Carney talked about Canadian values. I roll because what Canadian values in a global sense have been is to be subordinate to the imperial whims of the United States. Usually, Canada is involved in whatever regime change in the Americas narrative that the US or actually journeys that the US wants to take. I mean, I'm not saying, I still would like to know what we did in Bolivia, what we did in Haiti, and other places like that. Did we have anything to do with this Venezuela thing? These are all questions that I don't know if they're ever going to be answered, but they're worth thinking about. Canada has not been guilt-free. It's been quite effective in partnering with the US. What I do find, though, is when it comes to things outside the Americas, except for the war on terror, that's obviously an exception when you have, there were a few Canadians in Guantanamo Bay. And of course, if you know the story of Mehar Arar and how the RCMP sent him to Syria, it's Canada's done some dubious things at best. But when it does come to we are also in the same country that Canada that stayed out of the Vietnam War. Great decision. Stayed out of the war in Iraq. Also great. And so I really do think that there have been important decisions taken in that sense where we did not go with the US into their battles of imperialism, but I'm sure we supported them in some way. I also want to add there was no talk let me back up. So Carney talked about, if you've watched the whole speech, I will link it in this post. Carney believes that Canada can basically be made into an energy superpower. And he talked about critical minerals. He talked about stable democracy, that we have the fiscal room, or we have the money to do it, let's say. And That's all well and good, but I think this actually tracks with the trade deal that he did with China. I think that what we're going to do is we're going to develop a supply chain from the mining of the critical minerals all the way to electric vehicles and other sorts of goods. And if are we can become a more powerful nation if we do control our own supply chain, especially to create sort of green energy or stuff like that. So, when I talked about fomenting dissent, um, that's part of what I'm talking about. And that is part of how you topple a government, is that if they foment Albertan separatist anger, and if the Alberta separatists, through their donations and through the power that they have in the provincial government, if they can do so, they can create a big problem. Um, I find it I find it dangerous to dance with the Trumpers, because the thing about it is that Trump has shown over and over again that he will ditch you once he has used you. And I'm not saying that these people don't know that they're being used. I think that they think that the outcome will be somehow better. Like, I do think that they are true believers. And I have yet to hear how they're going to deal with America. Is America, are they going to join America? Are we doing this 51st state thing? Or do they think that they will be actually separate? Which I think is silly, because, to have a nation state, you have to have a tax regime, you have to have some type of citizenship, for example, border issues, how how you allow people to vote, how you allow them to insert themselves in the democratic process. I'm assuming this is going to be a democracy in their heads, but I don't know. The thing is, if they do separate, they are going to be fodder for US imperialism, which will have a foothold in Canada. So, nevertheless, Mark Carney is obviously the man for the moment. And to be honest, Canada, good job in electing him for this purpose only, okay? Because at the end of the day, we don't have that much political talent in this country. Like, let's be real. I think the party system is very much instrumental in in silencing certain voices. And it's only if you're leader of the party, which includes a lot of backroom political machinations, that you can actually make a difference like this on a world stage. Now, do I think this man is still in a neoliberal mindset? Yes, he's a neoliberal, okay? Nothing's going to change that. That guy's a banker, okay? And bankers are going to bank. I noticed that in the speech, he told a story of a man from then Czechoslovakia, and how he put in his window, "Workers Unite," and how, and Mark Carney's like, well, everybody knew that wasn't going to happen. And I was like, are you anti-worker? Well, of course he is, because he's a banker. So we have to watch out for Carney and labor, okay? With the EV, I have another video that I'm going to do about the trade deal, between him and China, or Canada and China, um, and the displacement of Canadian labor. And I can guarantee you, you're not going to know what I'm going to say. Trust me. As you guys know, I do not subscribe to a single left, right, center, da da da, because shit changes. And if you are not politically astute, then you don't know how to change with political landscapes. And the political landscape has definitely changed. Now, Canada. Let me show you why we made the right decision. Remember this little obnoxious shit? Cut to the video.
On the topic, I mean, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess. I mean,
What do you mean by that?
certainly
Give me an
you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
Left wing, this and that, right wing. I mean, it's that type of ideological thing.
I never really talk about left
But
or right.
anyways, a lot
I
of
don't
people
really believe in that.
Okay, a lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but
Like who?
I don't know who. But
Well, you're the one who asked the question, so
yeah.
you must know somebody.
What an absolute dick. I mean, nice try there, trying to stump the reporter, but you look like an idiot and you look very immature and like are we on the playground? I don't, whatever. Anyway, remember also that this is a man with no security clearance, so he doesn't know what the fuck's going on. Now, speaking of this man, Mr. Red Pill Poiliev, as I like to call him, do you remember when he swore that as Prime Minister he would never go to the World Economic Forum? Please, let me refresh your memory.
I've made it clear that my ministers in my government will be banned from participating in the World Economic Forum when I'm in government. Work for Canada. Work for Canada. If you want to go to Davos to the conference, make it a one-way ticket. But you can't be part of our government and working for a policy agenda that is against the interests of our people.
Well, that's all the fun we have for today. If you guys, please sign up. If you guys have suggestions about what you want to see or anything like that, you can email Bad and Bitchy. You will find all of the links to social and the email at the end of every post. Also, would love if you could buy me a coffee just to add to, appreciate the work. Let's put it that way. That would be great. I will be back with something else. I don't know about. I'll be back. That's the point. All right. Peace.